$50,000. My girlfriend Melissa is going to end up $50,000 in debt learning Chinese and getting a degree in Asian Studies here at the University of Victoria. And it's exactly the same university program that I was enrolled in fully 5 years ago, before I went away to live in Yunnan, China, before we went away to live together in Taiwan, before we enrolled in baking college and ended up getting kicked out of baking college or asked to quit baking college because we were vegan and the college couldn't handle having vegan students, even though they promised in advance that they could. It's been a long, rocky road these last 5 years. But Melissa has made the commitment, or is taking the gamble, to now enroll at University of Victoria and try to get formal education in Asian Studies, which means the politics of Asia, the history of Asia, book learning related to Asia, but obviously a big part of our current task outside of the classroom, just the two of us sitting here at this very desk, is to teach ourselves Chinese, advance in, progress in, reach higher and higher levels of ability in Chinese. $50,000 in debt is a lot of money to anyone, and it's a lot of money to us. I do not know if in the next 2 years I will have to go into debt myself, and that is basically the topic of this video. I don't get asked about my financial situation. I guess if I ever do, it's other YouTubers wanting to know how much money I make, which I've been incredibly honest and forthcoming about, unlike everything else in my life. And right away I send them a link to, oh yeah, this is how much I make per month, and I just lay out the facts. Now, while I was in Taiwan, I did make enough money from YouTube to pay my rent, but that was just because my rent was hilariously low in Taiwan. I was living in a small town called Puli in the central mountains of Taiwan, somewhere I'll probably never see again. Anyway, long strange story as to how I ended up in Puli. But yeah, if your rent is low enough and you earn $400 a month, YouTube and Patreon combined, then you can pay your rent with what you earn. But no, in my current circumstances and for the foreseeable future, I am financially dependent on support from my mother. I would say my parents, but my father is now deceased. And that financial support is finite, but we don't know how finite it's going to prove to be. Right now, during coronavirus, the family fortune and the family business is in unpredictable, if not dire straits, and that's okay. One of the reasons to be here in Victoria rather than being in Beijing or Thailand or Taiwan is that if my mother really does run out of money, if she can no longer support me going back to university, at least here I will have the legal right to work, whether I have to get a job at a 7-Eleven or a gas station or a grocery store. If I have to get some very humble work to keep going, I can do it. Now, I never want to misrepresent myself as broke. I don't do e-begging. I don't do fundraising unless it's for a specific project with a specific outcome, like when I raised funds for a court case. I made a post in text form on Patreon recently where I was relating my strange struggles with university professors and how dishonest some of these university professors have been with me, and how I think they lie to themselves also about the significance of money in meritocracy. Professors, when they think I'm poor, they tell me one thing, and then the minute I say, oh no, my parents can afford to pay for me to go to school here, their whole act changes, these strange differences in attitude. And some professors are in denial about the extent to which access to higher education relies on you having money up front, and some want to kid themselves, some want to kid you. So I had a post stating this, and one of my turns of phrase there, it's recalling an anecdote where I had this sort of interaction with a professor. I said to this professor, look, the problem is not money. The problem is that there are no universities offering me, a legitimate opportunity to get an education. And to emphasize that point, I said, look, if there were one university in the United Kingdom, England, Scotland, if there were one university that offered me, a genuinely valuable educational opportunity to learn an Asian language, to get a degree that could lead to employment, where I would really benefit subjectively also in terms of my career, my parents could afford to pay for it, and not just tuition. They could afford to buy me a solid gold desk and a fountain pen encrusted in diamonds. Now, obviously, I was joking. My parents would not buy me a solid gold desk. But I was saying to this professor in this email correspondence, look, what really matters is whether or not the educational opportunity is worth it. And my parents, at their current stage of life, again, my father now deceased, but in the final years of his life, they did have the attitude that they did not have when I was younger, that if there were a real educational opportunity for me, that it would be worth them going into debt also. It would be worth paying any price for. Now, that's common among Chinese immigrant families. That's common in many cultures to really see the value of education that way, where even if you don't have the money, to be willing to pay for it. Now, it's interesting to note, when I was younger, my parents did not have that opportunity, and the extent to which my parents' refusal to support me when it really mattered screwed up my life is a very interesting topic for another video. I pointed out to my mother, I guess it was about 5 years ago, that I wanted to enroll in a class to learn Chinese in Toronto back in 2000, 2001. Some of this was way back when I was young. And that class was taught in the high school system. So it was part of the adult night school program offered by Toronto's high school system. So it was adult learning night classes, but physically in a high school. So not a high school course. I think it was $200 Canadian. Maybe it was even less. It was like $180. There was only a symbolic fee because it was really provided by the Toronto public school system, by the government, right? And my parents would not pay it. And they had this fight. These are my parents. My father was already working in China. For years, my father had done work in China. I'd flown back and forth. They knew the importance of it. They knew about China. They knew all this stuff. They would not pay for me to have this course. And, and part of the good and the bad of it, definitely with my father and my mother to a slightly lesser extent, my father saw a lot of his money wasted on education for his other sons, who very simply were not intellectuals and never would be intellectuals, and who never made anything positive out of that opportunity. One of his sons kept dropping out of university again and again. It cost him a lot of money, and he would keep paying for this son to go back. And, guy was a moron at the beginning. He was a moron in the middle. He's a moron in the end. He's just not that kind of guy. That guy did some purely physical jobs that I think he was good at and that he enjoyed. I remember he had a period of time as a bike courier. I remember him telling me about that. He had a period of time actually in modern dance. Again, a very purely physical thing. But he is not a book learning type of guy. And it doesn't matter how much money you pour on him. You can't pay someone enough to make them want to learn. You can't buy the motivation, and that kind of character is something intangible. Another one of my half brothers, he finally did get a master's degree. Every time you meet that guy, it doesn't matter if it's over 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, every time you meet him, he's telling you a story about the last time he got drunk, about the last time he got high on drugs, including hard drugs like peyote, LSD, cocaine, heroin. Like, he'll tell you heroin stories. That's the kind of guy he is. And I don't pry. It's not like I'm asking questions that leave. He'll right up front tell you stories about this. And he's telling you stories about chasing women, getting laid. That's the kind of guy he is. And my father paid a lot of money for his education. In his case, a master's degree, not a PhD. But guess what? At the beginning, middle, and end of that, he sounded like the stereotype burnout. He sounded like someone, just his tone of voice, his manner of speaking, his habitus, his behavior. He sounds like a drugged up loser. He sounds like someone who's been using hard drugs since his teenage years, and that's exactly what he is. And I talked about that with my father just once, again, before he died. It was not long before he died, where my father was relating to me how these professors my brother had said different kind of discouraging and critical things to him. And, my father was basically relating this as being unfair. And I said to him, Barry, has it not occurred to you that what these professors are saying is just literally true, that this is quite reasonable? I said, can you take a step back and just listen to your son's voice? Can you listen to how this guy sounds and how he conducts himself? Like, do you not notice that he'll ask you a question and 5 years later he'll ask you the exact same question? He has no memory of the answer you gave last time. Like, do you not know this? Like, can you really not recognize that your son has all the signs of like a long-term alcoholic, drug user, etc.? And have you not noticed that that's what his life revolves around, is drugs, alcohol, and sleeping with women. Like, that's how he presents himself. It's not concealed. Like, can you not see this? And the answer from my father was no. He could not see this. It was a great example of a parent just not wanting to see the reality of who their kid is. So look, my parents had their own negative experiences with university education, and they had their own negative experiences with paying for their kids to go to university. That's not an excuse for the way in which they fucked up my life back in like 1993 to 2003, like many, many chapters ago. They made a lot of really bad decisions that had really negative long-term consequences for me, and they refused to support me when it mattered. However, having had all those experiences, and for them, they've seen a lot of proof of what kind of creative writer I am, what kind of researcher I am, the ways in which I can use my mind and intelligence productively, the ways in which I really am an intellectual, unlike some of my brothers and sisters. You know, they know what I can do. So what would be the point of me working at a 7-Eleven or me working at a Starbucks? By the way, back in when I was a kid and it mattered, I did work at Starbucks. Another story. I did work at a Whole Foods market at a grocery store. My parents did force me to do those kinds of jobs, which completely fucked up and ruined my university education back when it mattered. So again, another story. So, you know, but in their old age, having had good experiences and bad, they are at this juncture willing to support me. But that whole anecdote about the solid gold desk, the point of that is, even when the problem isn't lack of money, and the problem isn't that I have low grades at University of Victoria, that there still is no positive opportunity for me moving forward. I'm completely happy to be honest with my audience about what my financial situation is. I'm completely happy to be honest with my audience about my career and education situation. That is very fundamentally and integrally why I came on YouTube in the first place. I'm willing to be honest about a lot of things nobody else is willing to be honest about. And, you know, if I weren't, I would feel ashamed in looking back at my YouTube videos and seeing a lot of half-truths and lies. And I don't. For me, it's wonderful that YouTube is my diary. And it's also my way of sharing my life with my daughter, who I now very rarely get to see. I'm divorced with a daughter growing up in Europe. She can watch these videos and she can learn from my experience, good, bad, and different. She can draw her own conclusions. But in terms of what I'm going to do now and what's happening next in my life, I'm going to be honest with you. Right now, lack of money is not a problem for me. 3 months from now, 6 months from now, it could be. It could be that my life becomes a financial struggle. And if so, I'll be just as honest with you about that then as I'm being honest with you about my current situation now. I don't ask people to donate more than $1 per month on Patreon. I have not been e-begging for many, many years. Now, you know, there was a very different situation years and years ago now. It's like 4 years ago where I needed money for a court case, and I did a fundraiser just for that court case. And the money raised from the fundraiser, 100% of it went directly to the lawyer. I paid for my own airplane tickets to fly in and out and attend the court case, by the way. I paid for my own hotel rooms. I didn't do any fundraising for that, right? It was just money to pay for the lawyer. Very different situation. And that's program funding. If I were raising money for a particular thing, I don't know, there's a homeless donkey walking the streets and we want to do a vegan fundraiser, try to get this donkey into a, you know, sanctuary farm. I would do that. And I'd say, hey, look, the money's going to the donkey. Fine. If you want to donate it to you, I would do that. I would do fundraiser for a specific thing where it's good. And the money isn't going to me. The money isn't going to feed me. But the truth is say, the Patreon is $1 a month. I don't ask anyone to pay $5. I don't ask you to pay $20. There are no higher rungs on Patreon. Just ask for $1 a month. And why would you do that? Why should you do that? For the same reason that I would do that if I were somebody else discovering this YouTube channel. If I were in the audience, I would really appreciate this content I'm putting on you. I would want to see this content, and I would want to pay $1 to have the ability to chit-chat with the creator and, you know, have the kind of content, have the bonuses, and have videos made in response to my questions, which happens all the time in terms of Patreon supporters talking to me. You know, I would want to support that person. I would want to let them show that I care, and I would want to have that interaction. And $1 a month, these days, the old-fashioned saying was, it's less than the price of a cup of coffee. Well, I think coffee is $3.50 around here now. It's symbolic. And you know what's not symbolic, if you want to help the channel, if you want to help me have like a career on YouTube, is actually sharing the link when there's a video on a topic that's interesting and you actually know people, or you know a Facebook group, or you know a Reddit group, if you know people for whom a particular video would be meaningful or interesting, and you share the link, that really is helping me. Because even if money is not scarce in your life, even if you're not running away from poverty, it's very, very hard to be motivated to spend 6 hours or 12 hours researching and then recording a video. In my case, it's the research, not the recording, that takes time. Very easy for me to actually do the performance, as you've noticed. But, I have in the past put a lot of time into researching and recording a video. And then if that video only gets 400 views, for me, that is really defeating, for reasons that have nothing to do with the money that could be made or actually is made out of YouTube. It has nothing to do with the extent to which, I will still be able to buy groceries if only 400 people watch that video, or if nobody supports me. That's not the problem, right? But the problem is, in my own life, how do I prioritize putting those 12 hours into researching and recording a YouTube video as opposed to studying Chinese, as opposed to spending quality time with my girlfriend, as opposed to doing another 200 push-ups, as opposed to talking to my lawyer and weeping about the fact that I don't get to see my daughter. Fill in the blank, right? We all have other things to do. And I don't make YouTube videos for myself. This isn't a form of talk therapy for me. I really do it to reach out to and communicate with an audience. I really do it for the long-term, direct and indirect political and social consequences of making the YouTube videos available online. Very briefly, I wrote fan mail to a guy yesterday who had done book reviews in text form on the internet, and he stopped writing the book reviews in 2011. I found his blog where the book reviews are posted, and I sent him fan mail and said, look, I just want to thank you for those book reviews you did more than 10 years ago. I found them, and I know that it's not rewarding making this kind of content on the internet. I know that being creative, taking the time to write an essay like this on the internet, I know how cold and lonesome it can be to create something like this and put it on the internet, and then you hear nothing positive back from it. Or maybe you have a view tracker, and in 10 years only 50 people clicked on that book review and read your writing. I know. So I'm sending you this email now to really thank you. And I want you to know that when you do create something like that, you put it on the internet, it can have positive consequences 10 years down the line. It can have positive consequences 20 years, 200 years down the line. So it's hard to be positively motivated. It's hard when only 400 people watch a video. It can be hard when only 2,000 people watch a video. But yes, my point here is simply, quite apart from monetary reward, quite apart from the question of whether or not I can afford my next bottle of soy milk, that's not my situation right now, right? The question of reaching an audience and creating content that's meaningful in an audience and getting that feedback, hearing back now, whether it's through Patreon or the video being shared, that matters to me, and if you're my audience, I hope it matters to you too.